Welcome back to Geeker Reviews. I'm your host, Mike Wilkerson, and this is going to be my review for Season 1, Episode 3 of Superman and Lois, titled The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower. It's a nice nod to the movie, but I also think it plays to the idea and themes of that movie, which is coming of age, the genre of coming of age, because this episode, a lot of it is Jordan coming to grips and terms with the idea of coming of age, who he is, how he fits into the world, now that he's just learned that he has powers, like that he's just like an offspring of his dad, halfly. He's half human, he's half Kryptonian, half alien, half human, however you want to say it. He has all of these things, and what happens when you put him into a normal high school setting? It's really nice to kind of see him, going to school. This episode, and the idea of him wanting to essentially live his life and finding his place on the football team, essentially, which is really nice, through line they give Jordan, a nice little kind of conflict they set between Jordan and Clark this episode. So Clark is very, cautioning restraint towards him using his powers in Smallville. He understands what it's like to come to a place where he feels alienated. He understands how he feels, and he doesn't want, him to scare people with his powers. They don't know his limits yet. He could be one of the most powerful people in the world. He could be even more powerful than Superman, which is, crazy and mind-boggling to think about. And he just doesn't want anybody to get hurt, especially especially in the case of Jordan when he was at the bonfire, and his heat vision went off and hurt a lot of kids. Apparently, he doesn't want something like that to happen again at all in Smallville. But Jordan, obviously, him having social anxiety, he kind of gets sent down this rebellious path this episode. He's like rebelling out, and some people might find that annoying, but I find that kind of, reasonable for him to be rebelling out like this, like at this point in the show. Like, he just found out he's half Kryptonian. He just found out he's just like half human. And he's, scared. He doesn't know what to do with these powers. And if you were somebody like that, like, how would you know what to do with those kind of powers? So Clark, a lot of this episode, he's, checking in on them, at least in the beginning half of it. He's checking in on them, using his super hearing, something he has never told the boys since they moved there. And, he screws up. He doesn't trust his kids, especially with Jordan. He sees that, his heat vision could start going off, and once he starts getting bullied by these kids. But it's not like these kids are just, rebelling out or just like bullying him for the sake of it. They have especially this one kid has a personal connection to him because he kissed Sarah, basically this kid's girlfriend, and it wasn't cool of him. So it's not like they're just rebelling out for it. And a lot of it is him deciding he doesn't want to be that kid anymore. He doesn't want to be pushed around anymore. So he ends up, joining the football team. And this is where we kind of start seeing this conflict come to terms, like comes into play even more and more, which is, Clark doesn't want him, especially, him using his powers anymore, which, makes sense. He could hurt somebody, and, Jordan obviously believes like what he's doing isn't, wrong inherently. He just is like a little stronger, and that makes sense. He doesn't know how powerful he is. And even just me watching those portions of it is like him, getting knocked out. It feels like he does pack a pretty big punch, but I don't know if it's very powerful compared to Superman's punch. It just kind of depends on how hard he gets hit. It seems like he has a pretty big impact when they collide, but again, it could just be because like even way less apparent than Clark was, because it feels like Clark would be like at this point in the show pretty OP almost, just in the way he fights and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a nice debate, but I think what really settles it this episode is Jonathan. So Jonathan kind of steps in a lot, especially near the end of it, stepping up for his brother. But he steps in even at the beginning of him just, looking out for his brother, which I think is always a nice touch. Like, he's that kid that's always looking out for him. He's someone that gave up his life in Metropolis to not only be closer with, his mom, his dad, but also with Jordan and his brother. And it's kind of nice to give him a relatability factor with his brother, something that not many, shows go into, the brother sister aspect or brother aspect of it or anything, which is nice. But what was one of the more standout moments was especially in the end where Jonathan is finally seeing that Jordan has come to terms that Jordan maybe needs football. He's making friends. He's happy. Something he hasn't seen in his brother's eyes for a long time. And, it makes sense why he would want to stick up, even though it's kind of weird for him to say. It makes sense for him that, he wants him to be happy. And that's something that Clark has always wanted for his boys. He's always wanted them to see them happy. That's why they essentially moved to Smallville, so they could live their life and be happy. But he has to caution restraint against it. And, he eventually comes around and turns around, because I really like this line that Jonathan gives is, what's the point of being special if you're not allowed to be special? And it kind of puts things into perspective for Clark. Is like, well, guess what? Well, I guess what I can do is I can't really stop him from, using his powers maybe, but maybe I can just go in and keep an eye on him, make sure that he doesn't hurt anybody else. And one of the most effective ways he does this is by joining the football team as an assistant coach, as kind of more of a intern or a kind of God, what's the term? Like, my mind just went blank. Yeah. But an intern type thing, like an unpaid role essentially. But yeah, it just kind of makes sense that he would want to kind of join the football team and keep an eye on his son, but also it might even help bring him closer as a father as well. But yeah, the other thing I really do like this episode is giving Lois a kind of villain, Morgan Edge, trying to figure out why somebody with powers essentially is working for Morgan Edge when he comes around on it. The biggest thing that kind of developed between them is giving her own case this episode. So this woman named Sharon Powell comes into the office wanting Lois's and Chrissy's help to investigate Morgan Edge essentially and nail him to the wall and figure out what happened to her son essentially. Her son went missing this episode and he hasn't come back, and she believes there's foul play involved, as there's voicemail message on her phone of Derrick essentially saying goodbye, like, this is the last time I'm going to say anything to you. He had a job at the mine, like it's like a miner or something, like worked in the mines or whatever at Edge Intercore. And he paid a lot of money, sometimes sent some of that money back to her. And, but she believes that because, she hasn't heard from him since the night he went missing, that something is up with him. And she wants to figure out what that is. She actually gets somebody, like a goon, ends up going after Sharon just to tie up loose ends and basically ties her up, and she becomes unconscious. And again, it's interesting to give Lois a villain, somebody that we're not used to. I'm surprised it's more of like a journalist type of villain versus like, a Superman punchable villain. But I do like this kind of flip flop of it. It kind of gives it like this reverse of it. Like, it could be very boring of him just punching, somebody with powers or whatever, but it's really not. Like, this episode is more about like the journalistic aspect of Lois as somebody that just started at the Gazette, who is, still, understanding that not everything she's going to write for Chrissy is going to change the world. And at the same time, like, she makes a complete fool of herself this episode, going like accusing Edge, essentially accusing somebody like him, and getting her car blown up, having somebody gets sent, somebody that sends somebody after a mother, that makes it personal to Lois to really follow this angle. And then at the same time, making it personal to her when somebody blows up her car, but doesn't have evidence that it's something tied to Morgan Edge, which I think is really nice, because it gives, some limitability to Chrissy the Gazette, what she can and cannot do, especially as a journalist in Smallville, because as Chrissy said, like, she doesn't have like the multi-billion-dollar facility that Morgan Edge has. She doesn't have all these resources and lawyers to fight off all of like Morgan Edge and his company and all of that. But it makes sense. But yeah, overall, I'm gonna give this episode, I really thought this was a pretty solid episode. They play with a lot of ideas of coming of age and Lois furthering her journalism career, and even with Clark and Jordan having this debate this episode about whether or not it's safe for him to use powers. I mean, they play with a lot of cool, interesting ideas. I'm surprised it didn't get too overcrowded, but they actually played around with them pretty effectively. So I'm actually going to give this is my first episode, I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 too for Superman and Lois. I really enjoyed this episode. Not really many weaknesses this episode. But let me know what you guys think. What was your favorite part of Superman and Lois season 1 episode 3? And if you enjoyed the review, as always, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in the next Geek Reviews video. Peace.